What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and I'm here today to review Scream 6. It's actually kind of surreal that I'm saying that. I mean, we're 1 year removed from Scream 5. We're going to talk about Scream 6. I'm going to start this off by talking about it spoiler-free. We're going to just try to talk about, like, themes and, such, and then I'm going to get into spoilers. We are going to spoil it. We are going to talk about endings, stuff like that, but I will make it very clear when we get to that point. So let me just say, for those that haven't seen it yet or, care what I say without, going into spoilers, I loved it. I truly loved it. I've been trying to think if there's some sort of glaring weakness. You walk out of these things, you talk about them so much online, we're all kind of part of this, and maybe you go soft, maybe you go easy on the movie when you just walk out, half an hour removed from seeing it. I really believe this is genuine. I think this is one of the best Scream movies, period. Right now, I'd maybe even put it as my second favorite. I think I'd probably go so far to say that. There's very little wrong here, and there's so much good. The deaths are awesome. Emotion, my dear God. Now, again, without getting into specifics, we kind of just have to give these generalities. There is a lot of emotion. Want to give a shout out, let's say, to Melissa Barrera as Sam. She crushed it. We were rooting for her, at least me specifically, I was rooting for her. Didn't love her character in 5, didn't love the acting so much. She crushed it. She did an incredible job in all facets. And she had some range in this movie. They definitely put her through, some sort of range in the film, but everybody was great. A lot of really good acting. I personally thought I felt for these characters, whether they were the main group, which Mindy was awesome. She had a couple laughs. She had some really good, again, lines. Her explanation we'll get to a little bit later. She did so good, and you felt for her. Chad, oh, thank you, God. Chad did a lot of things in this film, and Chad was awesome. Tara had a personality. Jenna crushed it. There's a lot of dimensions, to her. A lot of it towards the end that we won't get so much into in the spoiler-free section. And then again, like I said, Melissa Barrera as Sam did awesome. Gail, Courtney Cox nailed it again without getting too much into her stuff, but she was great. Kirby, she was in it quite a bit. I'm very, very pleased with the amount of time that they gave to Kirby. Some of the things they had us thinking about Kirby, they did spectacular. But the idea that they got me to care about side characters like Danny, I was rooting for, and Annika, and like all these characters, like I was invested. And some of these characters we don't meet all that long, again, without going into spoilers, but it's such a contrast. Like, let me say it again. And actually, I didn't say this part. I said it's maybe my second favorite Scream movie. This is miles better than 5. It's not even, I don't even know if I want to watch 5. I'm just kidding. I'm sure I will watch 5 again, but this isn't even close. It's so much better for all those reasons. The leads kill it. I think the writing is kind of sharper. There is a lot of exposition. There's a lot of like kind of dumping moments, but that's kind of the case in any Scream movie. You got to catch people up. Kirby has some of those moments. Sam has some of, throughout the film, you're going to have those catch-up periods, and you learn some new information. I will say there are some weaknesses. They're more towards the end of the film. We saw, I believe Viewer Anon had said, it's maybe his weakest killer motives of the entire franchise. I think I might agree with that. I'd also maybe say the sloppiness of, you kind of just have to go with it. And I'll leave it there, again, for the spoiler section. There's a suspension of disbelief almost, or a belief that, okay, you kind of have to give it to the non-victims, let's say, so we're not spoiling, how many killers or whatever. You have to kind of give it to that. I'm trying to think of anything else. The opening, I thought, was extremely bold and different. It was easily the most unique of any opening in any Scream movie. But while it was bold, I'm not really willing to say I loved it. I think if I were to rank the openings, this may be the weakest. I've never been a fan of 3's opening, so maybe like 3's opening is the weakest. But I gotta say this, and this is something we talked about leading into this film. You gotta give them credit for trying, right? So like if they're gonna go bold and do stuff that we've never seen in a Scream movie, which they absolutely did, it felt familiar. Like all those kind of like headlines that we had seen leading up where it's like, we're gonna go bold, we're gonna do some things different, we're gonna push some stuff, but it's still gonna feel like a Scream film. That's exactly what it was. You felt like you were at home. You knew you were in the Scream universe, but they just tweaked it. They just did a couple things that you weren't really expecting. And while I didn't love all of them, you got to give them credit for trying. So like the opening, I'm going to give them a ton of credit for trying. And I didn't hate it by any means. I just thought maybe it was above average instead of like incredible. The ending, the motive, I actually wouldn't even say the ending itself because I loved the last 20, 25 minutes. And one final thing I'll say before we go into spoilers, this movie truly does move fast. It starts and it doesn't stop. There's a couple moments, but it's really only a couple. Some of them are actually similar to each other, so I kind of get confused when I'm thinking back with my wife, trying to plan out, what happened in this film. There's a couple scenes that kind of are not repeats, but they're the same general thing, so it almost gets confusing, but this movie just goes. And there's attacks, and there's stabs, and there's amazing ghost face calls, and there's close calls in general, and there's also some genuine emotion. And again, I'm really a fan of some of the seeds that I guess were planted in 5, further grown out in 6, and oh my god, what they could do with some of these seeds in 7 could be incredible. So I think we'll leave it there for the spoiler-free section. Go see it. Let me know what you think in the comments because, again, I super loved it. I don't give scores. You just have to go based off Alex loved the film, and I truly did. Let's go into spoilers, okay? I want to spoil it. We're going to kind of pick apart several different parts of the film. So let's start with the opening. Maybe we'll kind of go in order. I'm not going to recap the whole film, but the beginning was super cool in terms of what they were doing, right? I think it happened so quick. Like, it was quick, and it kind of built tension and then released it very, very quickly. Unlike what you normally, I guess, have, where it kind of, like, crescendos up, like, everything kind of gets really, really tight and suspense, and then once it's over, the opening is over, right? In this one, you have the Laura stuff, which I thought Samara did really well. She's in it for like 45 seconds. Nah, it's probably longer than 45 seconds, right? But I like, her being lured in and all this stuff. And like, don't you teach like film, film stuff? And then her dying was super fast. And then you find out, right, it was Jason, which there's the twist, right? Immediately, they're doing something they've really never done before. You immediately you do get a kill always in the opening, right? At least most times, except for 5. You see the killer this time, and then he dies. And it's like, okay. Again, it went really quickly, and it built up with Laura, and then with his phone call, it's a very long call. I'll have to listen to it again, because I liked it in the moment, but of course you're trying to listen and trying to pick apart different stuff, right? But it was extremely, extremely good. And then we start the movie, and we immediately go back and forth, really, between tension, high stakes, these likable characters dying, and then if it's not that, it's that family element that's actually been mentioned. I think maybe like Chad had mentioned it before, one of the producers of the film. We've heard it before. To see it play out, they all did an incredible job selling that they're in this together. And it took all of them. Like, Chad was very endearing with his protector role, Mindy as well. Like, again, as I've mentioned, Sam was so good. Sam was really good. She had a crying scene in the table, at the dinner table, early-ish on into the movie, and she cried. And it reminded me of the hospital scene in 5 where I had said, like, she was actually outshined by Jenna in that scene, I believe. I think her acting just wasn't there. In this, immediately, you're like, I like her a lot. I think the framing thing helped. Because you feel bad for her. It's like the whole film is like she did do it. She killed Richie, but she's not what they claim. And you can imagine, like, watching that on the news, she had a lot of frustration, people picking on her, right, like throwing the drink. I think she was written so much better, but also the delivery of the lines and her complexity, as we'll talk about as this, review or as the movie goes on. Like, she has that dark side, extremely dark side, and she does it beautifully, as she did in 5, but she doesn't always have to be that way, right? And when she's not that way, she's also extremely good. And the whole movie just kind of bounces off that. So, again, like the deaths, Annika's death, maybe specifically, you're rooting for her. At least I was. I was rooting for her so bad. It's going to happen, as the ladder's going, like it's absolutely going to happen, and then it does. And like, you felt it. At least it really hurt to see her die. And again, everybody sold it. Like Danny, Sam, and Mindy in that scene extremely sold it. Before that, obviously, we had Kirby come in, and I really liked any scene that Kirby was in. I would say maybe one weakness of the movie, it's hard to say this in the non-spoiler, the idea that Kirby could be a killer, like, I get it. And I would say for like a movie, because, Mark Kincaid, they kind of did that before, right? It did make sense. But what I'll say is I almost think they walked themselves into a little bit of a problem with this film, because three killers, even though, Detective Bailey, I mean, I guess he kills. I do believe he was the bodega attacker. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm right there. But because you had so many, and honestly, it was very obvious with Bailey and then Detective Bailey and then Ethan. I thought extremely obvious it was those two. Quinn kind of surprised me, although the way they did her death, I was very suspicious because you don't hear it. You see it on their phones. She's making like the moaning noises, right? Originally, she gets thrown on Annika, and it's like, I don't know. I don't buy it. And then when Detective Bailey comes out and he's crying, no, like absolutely I did not buy that whatsoever, and I knew he was the killer. And actually I predicted Ethan and Detective Bailey were the killer, yesterday or the day before. So I was locked in on those. Quinn was a little bit of an extra, but because of that, I think they did have problems making you suspect other people. So Danny was well done because I think Danny was a red herring as much as you can be. I loved his character stepping in front of Sam in the train, because for all they know, Ghostface is coming to stab them, and Danny steps right in front of her. And I, from a protective guy like that, I loved it. I thought he did an incredible, Josh, the actor, did such a good job with limited time because he really wasn't in the movie all that much. So I loved that, but he was a red herring. And then after him, well, who else are you supposed to try to suspect, right? The only other one, like Kirby, I suppose, Kirby's really, because you can't really suspect the core four. And then everybody else is being killed off. I never once suspected Annika because of the ladder sequence and the TV spots and stuff. So I think the Kirby thing was unfortunate in a sense because you couldn't, you had to blame somebody else. You had to try to get somebody else to look suspicious. And it's like, I'll follow you through, even when Detective Bailey calls and says, she was fired he's clearly lying. But I guess in the moment, and Kirby was acting really weird, but it's framing, right? I'm sure she didn't mean to act that weird, and she gets knocked out eventually. I did really like the Bailey-Kirby standoff, and then the Ghostface comes behind Bailey, and Kirby's shouting, and it doesn't matter. So, Bailey shoots, and then you have the big reveal. I love that. I just didn't love that you had to kind of put so much on Kirby that she could potentially be the killer. It's that doesn't happen in these films. Gale is never going to switch. Dewey was never going to switch. So I never bought it for a second. In fact, they made fun of that with Gale. Well, not made fun of. I think expanded really well with Gale. So let's talk about Gale for a second. Not a fan whatsoever of her doing the book. I think that was kind of a very cheap, the assassination of a character actually was a theme in this film. I don't think it was a character assassination because I will say, for any problems I had that Gale wrote the book when she explicitly said she would not, and Sam literally said that to her face, you said you weren't going to write it, you wrote it anyway, and then she made Sam seem like a killer, which probably did not help the conspiracy situation. So I hated that. I think that really went against any kind of growth that she had. And, again, Sam says that, what would Dewey think? And that's emotional because you hear Dewey's name, and then Gale, has an emotional face, but you still did it. So yes, that was an emotional thing where you got to say it out loud, but you still wrote the book. You had Gale talk about Sydney. Sydney was mentioned several times, liked it. So we got the explanation of why she wasn't there. They basically went into hiding. Perfect. That's actually what we kind of predicted they would say. And then leaning into, again, with the Gale phone call, leaning into you would be the one, you'd make a good killer. I think that was the line, right? You'd make a good killer. Dewey was the fan favorite. Sydney was the final girl. They would never be a killer, but you maybe could have. I mean, that was great. And Gale, again, for all those weaknesses of the book writing, the strength was that entire sequence. As soon as she picks up the phone, hello, Gale, on. Incredible. I mean, I actually think it was about as perfect as you could make it. My wife wanted to throw in about an Uno reverse that Gale had pulled with the please hold or whatever that line was, which I thought, I don't know if I laughed out loud, but I told my wife, I was like, that was so cool and that was so genius. She's very smart. Gale is a very smart character. You hear that in the conversation between them. There's kind of some digging from both sides of it, but specifically that please hold because of the phone, to figure out where the phone was coming from so she could, and she did nail that killer because you could hear the grunts. She absolutely nailed them. Now they probably had a bulletproof vest. But let me also throw this out here. I'll be honest, I thought she died. I thought they were going to kill her because, she just got so close. It's so, I don't know, realistic, modern day. When she gets stabbed, you hear the loud noise, you see the blood, all this stuff, especially when she got stabbed with like the shard of glass. And it's like, you didn't. You did, because we were so worried, or at least I was worried, that you would do Dewey and then Gale back to back, make it a Star Wars situation, which they actually, again, Mindy referenced that in explaining the rules, which I thought was a phenomenal scene. But like, it was right there. And then, when she has her pulse checked, and I was getting pretty emotional, and then, light pulse. She has a light pulse. And I was like, I really reflected Sam in that situation where Sam was really upset. And then as soon as she said, light pulse, Sam kind of, took a breath of fresh air and said, okay, thank God. I was actually the exact same way. There was also the line where Gale told Sam to tell Sydney that he didn't get her. I thought that was like a badass kind of moment, but again, another way to introduce Sydney back into it. Loved it. I mean, again, there were so many. The Anika ladder thing was awesome. The Mindy subway thing, I thought was really cool. It wasn't nearly as scary as kind of shown on like the TV spot or the first, I guess, teaser trailer with the train. There was definitely tension, and I thought it was beautifully shot. Ghostface kind of like, creeping up close to her. I expected her to get stabbed. I didn't expect necessarily what happened there. It was great. It just wasn't as like scary or as intense. The most intense was definitely the Anika ladder thing. Like, I was like up. You could feel like my weight was up during that entire thing, because that was incredible. From when Ghostface is busting down the door onto Anika dying, I mean, it was a perfect scene. I really believe that. And then let me talk about the ending. So the ending is probably the biggest weakness. The motive is relatively the same as 2, right? So they did copy what 2 did. Although they also copied the whole Randy, van thing. Mindy made mention of it where they were trying to lure them out with a call. Loved it. Modern technology, right? They're tracing the call, but the call's not coming from the park. It's coming from Gale's apartment. Beautiful. So that was a nice little nod without going too far. The ending, the motive was, again, relatively the same. It was revenge for the most part. It was just revenge because Richie was part of that bloodline. I was always, when Quinn had mentioned that they lost their brother, or her brother, and then the dad's son, immediately I was thinking, okay, it's got to be someone from the past. Like, is it Charlie? Is Charlie her brother and the dad's, son? But that doesn't necessarily make sense. And as the movie kept going, I guess it made a lot more sense for it to, be Ethan, and just for it to all be a lie. Again, it was very obvious. I think Ethan, one thing I told my wife, Ethan, I think, overcorrected. Maybe it was Jack Champion, maybe it was the writing, but him coming across so strongly that he wasn't the killer got very annoying to me very quickly, and immediately made me think it was him. He gave a lot of weird looks. He gave a lot of excuses. Oh, I was here. Oh, I'm part of the friend group. Oh, you're not blaming me, are you? I had an alibi. And so I couldn't really say that in the spoiler-free section. I would isolate that as maybe one of the most annoying parts. There's actually very few things that annoyed me in this film, but I think overcorrection is probably the right word, right? You're trying to blend in. You're trying to not make it seem like you're the killer, but you overcorrect and you keep giving excuses of why you are certain places. Everybody's on to you, and it's so obvious. So I really thought Ethan was the most obvious. Detective Bailey became quickly a prime suspect very early on. Quinn, again, I thought something was going down with Dorr, when that sequence was happening. And again, when Bailey walks out and he's crying, it's like, well, you wouldn't have killed your own daughter unless you're a psycho, which has been done in the past. Like, these people may not care about their family, but I got the sense that wasn't true. So I was on to Quinn. So it definitely was, like anticlimactic. It was incredible when Shad is, defending himself extremely well. I love the hand-to-hand stuff. Gale flipping Ghostface, Chad doing an incredible job one-on-one for the most part against Ghostface was awesome. And then when they both come, he gets double-teamed, very unfair, very, cheating-wise, and he gets, destroyed. Now, I think they should have this is the Dewey thing. He has to be the Dewey of this generation. He's now had 2 fake-out deaths where he clearly should have died, but he lives. And I would say much more than Dewey. Like, what he's gone through in 5 and what he went through in 6 is way more, without actually any consequence to his body, than Dewey in 1 and 2. Chad went through way, way more. So I don't know how to feel about them keeping him around. He was awesome, and I love him and Tara together. So, I'll take that for 7. but it's getting a little ridiculous. I'll say that, but it's something I guess I'll live with, like, whatever, because it was an incredible scene. Like, he's got it. He's going in for the final kill, right? Sam and Tara have kind of retreated. He's going in, and then the other Ghostface pops up, and they both, double team and stab him. How he survived that, I'm not really sure, but, it is what it is. And then the final, like, again, the motive wasn't that strong, and the connection to Richie and trying to frame Sam while also making her truly embrace that she's Billy Loomis's daughter, which we kind of already did in 5. So it was part continuation, and then part driving her to insanity, and then also part framing. Like, that was the idea, and I don't love it. Like, that was probably the weakest. It probably is one of the weakest motivations of any of the killers. However, the sequence was incredible. The attacks, again, like smashing Quinn with a brick, breaking her teeth, was incredible. Sam going nuts, stabbing Ethan. I looked to my wife and said, oh, like, here we go. Like, this is it. Sam is not messing around. Sam's going for it. Shooting Quinn directly in the head, charging Bailey. And okay, I loved her being Ghostface. Like, it was so good. And, I mean, Roger did such a good job of delivering it. We got his voice late, right, with this phone call. Very Sidney-like. So while Tara was a little Sidney-like, right, because she's the one who punched Gale, which is, I thought I would read into that more. And originally I did, right, because Tara's the one who punches Gale, not Sam. Okay, cool. But then you get to the end, and Sam definitely displayed most of Sidney-like qualities, and then she took it a little bit extra, right? So she wore the Ghostface thing, same as Sidney. Now, Sidney took it off, and Sidney stabbed Billy with a umbrella, whereas Sam went to town on Detective Bailey. Like, absolutely nuts went to town. But I loved it. So, I mean, the entire thing I thought was so well done, mainly from Tara and Sam. I thought they kind of carried it. Detective Bailey, like, Dermot Mulroney has a way of, like, talking where, I like him. I like him as an actor. I bought it. Jack Champion, I would maybe controversially say, I don't think he's all that great of an actor. I didn't love, like, when he goes nuts, you can still kind of see it's the same kid that was trying to overcorrect earlier in the movie. I didn't love his kind of he has high energy. You're supposed to have high energy when you reveal yourself to be Ghostface. Not a fan, but I am a fan of how he was taken out. Sam going to town, Tara destroying him. Yes, I mean, that was so good. And it was gory, I guess, without it being too gory, by the way. But I loved it. And then, you have the final scene with Detective Bailey, which, by the way, Tara eggs on because Sam really didn't seem like Sam stopped. Like, Sam destroyed him with, 50 slices. I thought she was going to stab him just as many times as she stabbed Richie, on purpose. But then she was done. And he probably would have died anyway. But then Tara giving her, the nod to finish him, and then Sam does it, and then the ending. So Sam has the mask. She steals the mask, and it's that continuation of, I believe you can still do this with Sam. I think you can put her over the edge. I don't know if it's the right move, but I'd say what they've done so far, mainly in 6, was masterful. I really love what they've done with Sam in building her up as will she, won't she? And they do it really well in this one up until the ending. My wife also reminded me to not forget about the TV. Well, number one, they continue the Stu thing where Kirby says that's the TV that killed Stu, and then Mindy says, if you believe he's dead, right? So, there's the conspiracy, he still maybe isn't dead. So that's one big thing. Number two, killing, Jack Champion's Ethan, killing him, and Kirby being the one, because everybody actually, if you think about it, they all got a piece of the pie. They all kind of did their job against their individual person. Tara did most of Ethan. Kirby finished him off. And then Sam just destroyed Quinn and destroyed Detective Bailey. Although, again, Tara, I believe, is the one who hit her with the brick originally. So they all contributed, and I loved it. Again, with the Kirby thing, she was great. She was in it way more than I thought. Loved her lines, loved her spunk, her little riff with Mindy on the horror thing. She's had some troubles, if you go into her personal life, there was a lot of stuff that happened with her basically since Scream 4, but she did such a good job, and keeping her alive, I think, is a very smart move because more of her in the next one, the better. And then you have the ending. So Sam taking the mask. And again, this was kind of a theme where she was listening to Billy the entire time. She originally tried to fight it, but anything Billy said, really, Billy told her to get a weapon, and she took his knife. So it's she's clearly can be influenced by this inner voice in her head. So much so that, well, number one, she did stop. She didn't go all the way with Bailey, and then Tara told her to, basically, so she did it. she is very much still unhinged. Like, you don't do that to Bailey. You don't do that to Ethan earlier when she stabbed him. You don't do that if you're a little unhinged. Tara was laughing when she stabbed Ethan through the mouth. So she's a little crazy too, but mainly Sam. But Tara, you can do some stuff with her as well. And then so much so that Sam takes the mask at the end, and the only thing that stops her, like, it did look like possession, because you kind of like, it goes quiet, zooms into her face, she looks down at the mask, like, it's like it was calling to her, and she's kind of like rubbing it. So, like, I get that kind of possession idea where, yeah, I mean, she could go into it, and then Tara stops her. I mean, Tara kind of distracts her, and she drops the mask, and it's, that's it. But she was so close. Like, she's right there, and she's right there closer than what she was at 5, I think. So the idea that you can't do this with her, oh, no, it's still open. And I love that they just now how they conclude it is, I mean, you got to look to 7 eventually. We can still talk about 6 quite a bit over the coming weeks, but how you finish this in 7, it's important because you've done some really different, interesting things with Sam. Finish it. Finish it in some way, and I'm sure they will. So there you go, kind of breaking down different parts of the movie. The more I'm talking about it, sometimes when you talk about it so much, you may start to feel, other things. Again, maybe like Jack Champion's acting was definitely subpar. There were some things, the motive and stuff, but thinking individual scenes breaking down, I still absolutely love this movie. And I guess final thing, it felt different. It looked different. This was not the bright colors of Scream 4. It was also not the familiarity that we had in 5. It looked different, but it felt like Scream. You had the music. You had Ghostface. It felt like you were in that franchise, but it also felt so different because we've never, I mean, super credit to them, the filmmakers, how things were shot. It just looks, I watch all the other ones. I'm sure I'll watch the other ones. It's a very different kind of Scream movie, and I thought they crushed it. So there you go. I am going to make some more videos as the days go on. I'm going to live stream a couple times as well so we can kind of break down specific stuff. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. I can now read all the Scream comments that I haven't done in like 3 weeks, so I'm very happy about that. And if you made it this far, you want to talk about it more, we do have a Discord server. I'll leave it in the pinned comment, and it's in the description. If you guys want to join the Discord server, talk about the film there, you can do that. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.